Good evening, good evening, good evening. Well, good day, wherever you might be. But welcome to Azure Community Live. This is an online meetup about Azure for the community. I am here in my data center, obviously. No, not really, but I sit in a boring office, so I gave you a better background. I'm your host, I'm Lars Clint, and the idea behind this online meetup is that everyone anywhere, anyone anywhere essentially can join and can present. And I live in rural Australia, so I don't have the chance to go to meetups all the time because, well, obviously now with COVID we have to stay at home. But in non-COVID times, I can't just go to the city every now and then. So I like these online meetups, and that's why I created it with Esteban Garcia and Geert van der Sluisen. It's probably said very incorrectly. I apologize, Geert. So, if you want to present at Azure Community Live, give us a yell on Twitter or fill out the CFP on our website. We will get to it, I promise. We've had quite a few CFPs, so you can also just ask questions via Twitter or YouTube as well. So I'm here with JK because I'm not going to pretend to know how to say your name, JK.
JK is now my official name.
It is. Now it is, exactly. So you've got 10 years of experience in software engineering, and you've worked on full stack .NET development, mobile applications, and Microsoft Cognitive Services, which is interesting. And I want to use Cognitive Services very soon. JK has also worked on some of Australia's largest corporates, or with them, with great customer satisfaction. Go JK. You are here today to show us how to get rid of paper forms with Azure Forms Recognizers. This is going to be really cool. So thank you, JK, and welcome. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. And yes, what I'm going to show you is a little bit how I try to get rid of hundreds of pages of forms and get it into digital formats and get some value out of it. Can
Cool.
everyone see my screen?
Not yet, because I was just going to say first that if you do have questions and you're on the live call, not the recording, feel free to put them in the chat on YouTube, and I will get to them. Either if they're right, pertinent to what we're talking about, I might interrupt JK, or we'll do it at the end. Either works. So, but now they can see your screen. There you go.
That's great. So basically what I'm going to try to do is get from physical paper to digital power, and we're going to use Azure Form Recognizer to achieve that. First, like last introduced me, I'm Jernej Kavka, or you can just call me JK because I know it's hard to pronounce my name. I am SSW Senior Software Architect. You can follow me Twitter, GitHub, my blog, LinkedIn. At the daytime, I mostly worked on .NET Core, EF Core, but at night I put my night call and I worked on cognitive services and ML.NET. You can see my special uniform for ML.NET. And I really, really love AI. It makes me feel sometimes like a superhero. And because of the situations we are here, this is kind of what I currently see. This is you, the audience. So when I look straight at you, I'm actually looking at my overlord, this little robot. And, we all have to exercise. So if you're thinking about, do you want to go into VR and stuff like that? Definitely go. Like 2 days ago, I started training at 11 p.m. and at 1 a.m., all my muscles were hurting, and I was thinking about, why am I still awake at 1 a.m.? And then remembered, oh yeah, fitness is fun now. And I also worked on Cognitive Studio. You might not have heard of it, but if you're working with cognitive services, what I want you to be able to do is to have a tool where you can just add your connections to your cognitive services and just try out in the browser without needing to write the application. And in fact, I added a new functionality for Form Recognizer, which I'm going to show you as part of this presentation. But you have like Face API, Text API, Speech API, and I'm trying to add more and more stuff as I do presentations and demos. So hopefully it's going to be quite complete applications with various different services in couple of months. Anyways, so what was the motivation for me to get into form recognizer? What did I wanted to do is quite an interesting problem. So we at SSW have a lot of user groups, and a lot of user groups in Brisbane's. What they have is like a paper form after they present. And what they really, really want for the user groups, for the presenters, for the organizers, is to be able to not just get the feedback from the users, but also be able to react to it, to basically analyze the feedback. And I was thinking, okay, if you have a physical paper, then, how do you process it? And I looked at how we were processing the forms. And the process was kind of like, first we present, obviously. Now, this is pre-COVID, so for anyone who doesn't know what a physical user group is, it's just like a virtual one, but you're in person. I know it's hard to believe, but that's what we used to do. Now, after that, we give people feedback forms, and they fill out those feedback forms, and they give it to us. And then somebody has to scan all of that. Now, that's all good. We upload it to SharePoint. And then there was a strange step that I thought, okay, why we are doing a summary of the feedback? So somebody actually reads through all of the forms and then writes an email with summary. Well, it turns out, before we move to the next step, we dispose all of the forms for your privacy. But then sometimes later, sometimes weeks later, sometimes months later, sometimes never, we are processing that into CRM, which can be in a format where we can actually analyze the data. Now, the problem here was the scanning and quick summary took about 1 hour. But the manual process of entering every single event of all of the fields, all of the checkboxes into CRM took almost 3 hours per event. Now, if you have one event, that's okay. But we used to have a lot of physical events. Not right now, so this is not the problem that we have at the moment, but I'm getting ready for the moment where this is going to be a problem. So we have a lot of user groups in Brisbane, Melbourne, Sydney. We also had Gold Coast, Newcastle, and possibly more. And then we have trainings in multiple cities for different technologies. Then we have hack days in 3 cities for 3 different technologies. And that sums up to a lot of events. And we can have up to 100 attendees per event, up to 5 cities. There's like up to 10 events per month. If it's like NDC Sydney, it could go even crazier than that. But the biggest problem was if I want to give feedback to all of the presenters for all of these events, you stack up hundreds of hours of manual labor, and it's not practical. So what happens is you get lots of paper that you need to scan, you need to process, and if you don't catch up, you'll end up with a huge stack that you have to first scan, and then you have to enter all of the data. And you need to make sure that everything is secure and all of that stuff. Now, when you're making these forms digital, we realized that it works really well for virtual events. So you have Google Forms, you have Microsoft Forms, Monkey Service. All of that works really, really well if the event is virtual. But if you're trying to replace physical feedback forms with digital, what we found is that participants didn't like to copy the links from the presentations. They didn't like to scan the QR codes because they didn't know to what link it goes, or they didn't know whether they even have a QR code scanner. No, probably wouldn't be a problem because you need to have a QR code scanner at every restaurant. So hopefully that won't be as a problem as it used to be. And unless you promise them rewards on the day, most of the people won't scan the QR codes anyways. And if you promise a reward for every single event, that can be expensive. Another way that we try to solve the problem is, what if we have a tablet where before you go outside, you just tap red, yellow, or green. Now this works well if you want to just figure out, are people generally happy, unhappy, somewhere in the middle. But the problem that I have with this is, if they're unhappy, why they're unhappy? Is it the presenter? The AC died and it was super hot. So the presenter was great, but the place was horrible. Was something wrong with the food? We don't know because you just select one of the colors. You don't know for what that color is. It's just like an overall feel of the person. So that unfortunately isn't great for us. But for instance, NDC conference is using this system, and it's working really well because they have a lot of presentations and they basically just want to get the feedback whether the presentation was great, so they invite the presenter for the next conference, or it was horrible and they might have a second thought when they look at presenter. Probably, maybe. Okay, so we are sticking with the feedback forms, at least for the physical forms. So how can we use Azure Form Recognizer to fix the problem of having 2 to 3 hours of manual labor? How can we reduce that to practically nothing? Well, with Azure Forms, if we look at this at the Microsoft website, what we can see is that it allows us to recognize, tag the text in a form. And by default, it supports things like US receipts, tables, and basically what's happening is, if it doesn't recognize the form that you're sending, or you want to do customization, you want to add your own tags and stuff like that, you need to turn to custom form recognizer. And that's what I'm going to cover. I'm not going to cover the built-in one because it's basically a lottery whether it's going to work fine for what you're needing or not. All right, so when we're doing custom form recognizer, this is to use for your own forms. You can specify your own tags, your own structure of the form, and it uses machine learning with combination of OCR and custom machine learning. So when you select a particular text and say, this is this text is this label, it uses custom machine learning to then remember the rough location of that text relative to the entire form. And then if it has enough forms, it can then figure it out how to correctly tag a particular text. And this is done in 2 phases. One is training and the other one is usage. At the beginning, you'll need to gather enough training forms. You need to manually select all of the text to be tagged, which I'm going to show you in the demo shortly. And once this is trained, then you just need to call APIs to get the results. That's also what I'm going to show you later. Now, to get started, there are a couple of things that you'll need. So first one is an Azure account. Then we need to have PowerShell core. You generally don't need it, but I'm going to show you a trick how to get a half an hour setup down to 2 minutes, and it requires a PowerShell core. then Azure CLI on the PowerShell core. And for uploading your forms, you'll need to have Azure Storage Explorer. Now, the quickest way to start is a script that I have written, and you'll be able to download it over here. I can share the link at the end. And what it will allow you to do is to get a 30-minute setup process. Some take, I believe the last one that tried to do all of the steps took about 1 hour to configure it. And with this one, most of the people managed to do it in about 2 minutes. So it does drastically reduce the amount of time required to get up and running with Form Recognizer. And what it does is, if you look over here, we have create custom form recognizer.ps1. You can just specify what should be the name of the form recognizer resource. Then you can specify where do you want the images to be stored in, what is the name of the storage account, what is the resource group on your Azure. Now you need to specify how long you'll be able to have access to the storage account for the form recognizer trainer. And then also you'll need to specify how you want to use the custom form trainer, which is then when you run this, it's going to do a lot of things. It's going to configure all of the resources on Azure. I'm going to show you this a little bit later. And once it's done, the important bit here is this script is actually giving you instructions. I try to do as good as possible that once you're done building it, you can just follow the instructions. It shows you, wait, you need to make sure that you have Azure Storage Explorer installed, then make sure that you upload images to your storage account, to the right blob container. And for instance, if the installation type is web, you just need to open this URL in the browser. And over here, we have all of the other configurations that will be required by the tool that is used to do custom form recognizing. And if you're in doubt, I also included my URL to the blog post where all of that is detailed. So let me show you how this works. I have some resources in Azure. And what I'm going to do over here, I am going to say, I want to do installation type, let's say Docker, for instance. What it's going to do over here is it's actually going to check, hey, do you have Docker installed? And it's going to download the tool that is used to do training of your forms, the Docker image, and it's going to give you instructions how to run the Docker image so that you can start doing training. And you can see here, everything is done automatically. I only had to specify all of the resources on the top, the resource group, and how I want to use the training. So over here, it tells you, install this tool. I noticed that you have access to Winget, so you can just literally just copy this command and run it. So anyone who doesn't know Winget, Winget is like chocolatey, and if you don't know what is chocolatey, it's like npm packages and NuGet packages, but for Windows. And over here, you'll see that it actually gives you the Docker commands to run the tool. Now, I'm a little bit lazy, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to just use web, because I basically have already everything set up over there. I don't have to run anything on my machine. It's also the fastest way if if you're not interested in the very latest features, to just get up and running. So this is going to take just a little bit. We can see over here that it's trying to create storage containers. It tries to get connection strings from the Azure storage, configures course setup. There's instructions on official Microsoft page if you're really interested in how all of this works. And what I can do now is copy this. And I'll paste it over here. And we have this tool over here. Now, before I start building anything in this tool, I want to go first to the Azure Storage Explorer, because I want to show you the images that I have uploaded. So this is Azure Blob Storage. Yeah, dismiss. And if I go back to Git, what you'll be able to see in the step 2, it tells you that you should open Visual Studio Ultimate, storage accounts, proto storage to forms. So I'm going to do that. We have this, storage accounts, proto 2, blob containers, forms. So it basically tries to guide you through what to open. Now, I cheated a little bit because this is not yet configured here. I'm going to actually use this one instead, but I didn't want to leak my keys because all of the keys are exposed over here, and I didn't want to remove everything that I'm currently using for sake of the demo. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this image just for testing. So I'm going to remove that. And I am going to re-upload it. Actually, I'm going to re-upload it later. Just to let you know, the jpeg.labels.json are the labels that are being created while you're using the tool, as well as OCR. I'm going to show you everything in the demo. And what I'm going to do now that I have all of the images over here, I'm going to create a new project. So over here, I'm going to do display name is going to be UG feedback v3. I am going to take the GitHub command line. And what you'll notice here is the 4th step is create a new project and follow and use the following details. So I'm going to do that. You can select display name what you like. And over here, I'm going to click add connections. Best connection, and I like to do the current date, which is 20, and then SAS URI. You can see it is this one. So I'm going to copy this URI, paste it over here, save. Now you're going to see something weird. It navigates to this page. What you need to do is go home, click new project, and what you're going to see is it actually retains all of the settings that you had previously. And you can also see that in the source connection, it actually selected the test connection that we just created. I'll leave folder path empty, and over here, you can see that form recognizes service URI. I just copied this part like this, and I'll copy this part like this. And when I save this, it sometimes takes a little bit. Okay, it works. And just to show you that I'm brave and I'm going to live demo this, I'm going to upload one of the image. I'm going to go over here, and if demigods are happy with me, it should work. And it did recognize it. That is bizarre. All right. It didn't work on the first try. I do have a separate project over here. I don't know why exactly that one failed. It usually works on the first try, but I have already prepared some of the forms over here in a separate project, but I did the same steps as I previously shown. And I'm going to demonstrate this by going to forms. I'm going to remove the image one. So we shouldn't see any image one over here. And I am going to upload this. So once this is uploaded, this is happening because I started this project very early on. Okay, I'm using fonts too. Sorry about that. Yes, it was forms too. So you can see that what should have happened is once I upload the image is visible right away over here. I'm running the OCR the very moment I clicked on it. And what's happening behind the scenes is when I refresh this page, you can see that we actually have a new file .ocr.json. All of the OCR is being cached. And what I can do now is I can zoom in, click on this text here, and I can say this is a position. So I can say that this text is a position. Today's topic is this. And if I want to add new text, I can just zoom in into text, say I am interested into tagging this. I can select all of the text. I can click the plus over here and say
Close the door
there
because the heat
any
just
other topics
I don't.
label. And now I have created a new label. So I can now click on this label and you can see that the color has changed. And this is what you then need to do for all of the images here. The OCR happens automatically when you click on it. And once you have everything labeled, now I won't label everything over here as that would be time consuming, but I can go to train. I can click on train. And what we should be getting is how accurate each of the tags are. Now you'll see that some of the tags have pretty low accuracy, and I think it's just because a lot of people didn't give us any tips, at least in the training data. So the accuracy to that is pretty low. It's also rounded. You can see that everything is a round number, but you can see some tags are very accurate. And now that we have trained, to test it out, we click over here on the prediction, on analyze. We do browse. I'll open up this one, run analysis. And now it's going to send it to form recognizer. So this tool that you're seeing right here is something that Microsoft is building. You can check it on GitHub, and it allows you to build up all the custom tags and train and try out all of the things very quickly without needing to spend a lot of time. You can actually let someone else that is not a developer work on this tool, and they can actually do a lot of work for the forms to be recognized. And if we look at the accuracy, how well it recognizes, you can see, for instance, if we zoom here, it is a bit hard to read, but it did correctly identify this to be a developer. If we go here, it does recognize actually the crossed out word, which is David. And it also correctly recognizes Tom Harvey. Now, it doesn't correctly recognize this part, which is the infrastructure as code with Graphis. So here it couldn't quite recognize what that meant. If I remember correctly, it means Terraform. And there's also other things that it doesn't quite perfectly recognize, but you can also see that the things that it doesn't really recognize great are actually quite hard to read anyways. So a human actually need to look at it and look at what they meant to write rather than what's written. So in this case, for instance, you can see why it recognized as infrastructure rather than infrastructure, because this does actually look more like an F than an N. So all in all, it actually is a pretty good OCR. It does really good. It does matches up tag with the correct text pretty good. There are a couple of things to be aware of though. You can see over here that it actually recognizes the stars as the dots as stars. This is kind of a design flaw of the form, and unfortunately, form recognizer recognizes this as an actual symbols part of the tag. I hope that in the future we can filter this out, but the solution is that you just use a solid line rather than dots. I would not advise you to use dots, but most of the time it works well. You can see that over here the dots do not interfere, but there are a couple of cases where you can see it, for example, over here, where it takes this text, but then it also takes these below stars as part of the text. So this is how the recognition works. Now, if you want to try to use this, one of the easiest way to do it without looking at the documentation is just go to network pane, and I'll do that, and just try to run the analysis. And you can just look at the request that it's doing, and you can just copy paste, modify the way things are doing. Like for instance, over here, you can see that it's using this model, and the input is the byte arrays. So you just need to stream the file. And you can then also observe the response, where you can see that status is not started. And once it's done, it sends a succeeded, and it also adds this analyze result. Now, you might be like, okay, I don't want to do this. I want to have an even easier way to do this. And one easier way to do this, if I get back to the presentation, is via logic apps. So why do any code if you can do no code at all? And the reason why logic apps is really great is because I can suddenly take my phone, or somebody else can take their phone, they can install Microsoft Flow. You can have these flows that actually uses the Azure Form Recognizer. And then they can take a picture and they can upload it to the action. And then at the end, the action gets executed. And in this case, it's going to send an email. So I'm going to show you this demo. So I'm going to go into the form recognizer, into Microsoft Flow. I have already here 2 actions. And the reason why I have 2 actions is because I want to show you the way you will be able to do in the future, but not right now. If I edit this, you'll see that we have specific steps like analyze form, and it's under preview. And what's going to happen is if I try to run this, unfortunately, it's not going to work. And I believe this is not going to work because this is using the API version 1, but we are using the API version 2. So this is then when it tries to find the model, the version 1 API doesn't have that model. So it says, I couldn't find the model, I couldn't recognize the image. So this at the moment doesn't work, but I believe that Microsoft is going to release the final version of the form recognizer actions that will work with version 2. And then you'll be able to just run a simple command like this and then just get all of the results really, really nicely. But while we're waiting for this, we can actually do this ourselves, and you'll see why it's great that Microsoft will solve this problem in the future. So I'm going to do an HTTP version of this. So what that means is I'm basically replicating the same URI that the OCR form training tool is doing. And I'm replicating that process via logic apps. Microsoft Flow Power Automate. And what I'm doing over here is I'm saying at the beginning, I want to be this a manual trigger, and the input to this manual trigger is a file. And once I have saved here a variable for my subscription key, I can then put the file directly to the body as file content, call this URL, which reference the model that you can actually see if I do F12 over here. If I run it again, this is the model ID if you're struggling to get it. And what's happening over here is once I run this, the response will have a operational location. So let me run this. It's going to be a little bit easier to show. I'll upload, say, this image. Run. So now I'm actually running the process. So what happens is we get the input as the file, the output give us 202. So that means that it's either in progress, it hasn't started yet. And in the headers, we get operation location. So this is where we actually need to look up for results. So I saved this result into a variable so I can look up later. I'm doing a couple of other things in the variables, not quite important. Just, because we don't have everything in one neat step, we're doing this manually in the Power Automate. So the next step is actually ask on the operation location that we got from previous request, are you done yet? And it's going to say 200, not started. Okay, you're not done. So what I'm saying is, okay, if you're done, if you're not done, then just wait for 10 seconds over here and then loop again. So if we scroll up, if we go another iteration, which happens about 10 seconds later, what's going to happen here? The response is succeeded. And if I scroll lower, you can see there's a big JSON, which I then store it in this variable over here. And because we found that this was successful, I set up a couple of variables that I'm going to use later. And over here, I'm just checking if I got an error. If I got an error, I just terminate. There's nothing to process. If it's not, I continue on. I parse the JSON with a new schema that includes all of the details of the form. And then I go through each of the document. Usually you'll have only one document per request, but I believe the API also allows you to send multiple documents. I haven't quite tried it. But what I can do is, in this case, I basically try to get a couple of variables in one specific area where I get all of the tags and the text, so that I can do a sentiment analysis, which then gives me a score. Say, Scrum isn't the only Alice way, which is an interesting statement. Enjoyed the debate. So it seems like it was something about DevOps. And then under conditions, what I'm doing is true or false. If the sentiment is good for both of the sentiment analysis, I'm sending a positive email over here. And if it would have been a bad one, I would have sent it a negative email saying, hey, you should look into this. Somebody was writing something bad about this. And let me try to open up email. Okay, so this is what I got in my email. And essentially, what I did is I've written an app. If I minimize this a little bit, a Power Automate flow that over here at the end, after we've done all of the form recognizer actions required to actually get the data, that's going to be condensed into a single action once Microsoft publishes the stable steps. I can do just a sentiment analysis, which is another cognitive services, and I can do more and more steps over here, deciding what to do with the data. I could decide to serialize it into different format of JSON and then save it into Cosmos DB or SQL Server. I could make a tweet about people saying that something went great with the user group and stuff like that. And I wouldn't need to write any code whatsoever. Not to do the training of the form recognizer, not to upload the images to the form recognizer. It's all no code, which is really, really amazing. And yeah, and what's the most amazing thing about this is I can just tell people, admins, that they are at the event, they're making sure that everything is going right. When they get feedback, they can just use Power Automate app, take a picture, use this step over here, the form recognizer HTTP, and everything else is automated. So this is something I'm aiming for our user groups, and I'm hoping that other user groups will look at this and it's like, say, hey, maybe we want this as well, and I can help them out getting to this point. But some of you are developers and you're like, the Power Automate is great, but I want power. I want to do it myself. And if you want that, but you want to get familiarized with Form Recognizer, I mentioned previously Cognitive Studio. Cognitive Studio actually allows you to basically create a new profile where you can actually add all of the configuration for your cognitive services. And this is stored in your browser. This is not stored on cloud or anywhere. And when you go to the form recognizer, you can actually see all of the models that you have created so far. And I can click on this one. It tells you when it was created, when it was last updated, and whether it's been properly trained or not. And you can then choose another file. I'll not pick this one. I can click on Analyze. I can see there's an interesting bug over here. And by the way, this is all Blazor. So this is client-side Blazor, no server backend. It takes a little bit, especially if you're on free tier. You may need to wait a minute because you can do only one analysis per minute. And here you have a little bit of a developer output telling you the similar results that you would get in the Power Automate. And I am working on the way where you'll be able to see exactly what requests have been made to the API and how you can integrate this in your applications. Right now, I'm only giving the Microsoft Cognitive form recognizer official demo and blazing receipt, which is a demo that somebody did, which looks really amazing, but it uses the built-in form recognizer. All right, so we have that. So what have we learned from all of that? Well, one thing that I learned is that handwriting is very challenging for AI, but also for humans. So if a human has problems reading a handwriting, then AI is probably going to struggle as well. But usually if a human can read really quickly and easily, the AI will probably work well as well. Now, if you have printed text, this is going to work really, really well. But if you have handwritten, you just keep in mind that you might need to have someone who corrects the inputs. Now, form recognizer works, with the printed text. The initial setups can be very lengthy. The steps that I've shown you takes quite a bit of time. I have written the scripts to shorten the time. The last build of the tool doesn't seem to work quite right. I could see that the configuration was saved in the form recognizer, but it didn't pick up the image. It worked a week ago, so I need to check why that's happening. But this is why I given multiple options how you configure. You can use then the GitHub instead of web. So if I switch over here, you can select here GitHub, and you can actually work with the latest version of the tool. Maybe they have introduced a bug. This is still in preview, so you can get the latest code. And then you can even debug the React app and see what's wrong and report it to the team. And you can also use Docker, which means that if there's a version that you know that works well, you can actually use that particular version on your machine rather than trying to fix yourself or basically tell the team if they can fix it for you. Don't use dotted line, please don't. And checkboxes are currently not supported. However, the last part of my presentation is exactly about checkboxes and radio boxes. And this was a very interesting journey for me, because one of the most valuable parts of the information, at least to me as a presenter and organizer, is this. And they're all radio boxes. And they're all the data that I currently cannot easily get in Form Recognizer. Now, this feature is going to come into Form Recognizer soon, ish. We don't know exactly the timeline for it, but I wanted to solve this problem, even if that means that I have to go crazy, crazy length, and I mean really, really crazy length to solve this problem. So I was thinking about how hard can it be? Let's see how hard it could be. So I was thinking, okay, I can use machine learning, right? Custom vision to recognize where the radio boxes is, and then I just need to figure out whether it's checked or not and the location of it, right? simple, right? So I was thinking about, okay, I use object recognition on Azure Custom Vision. I upload 15 different images, and then I manually draw boundaries for all of the unchecked and checked boxes. Easy, right? But it turns out it took me about 2-3 hours to do this, but I was like, it's definitely going to work. You just have to, right? It's easy, right? Uh, Custom vision is really, really good, but I found out that radio boxes seems to be a bit of a Achilles heel, at least for me right now. I don't quite understand why it doesn't work well, but I think it's because there's too many similar shapes to a radio button, like O's and other things. And I'm just saying, recognize this object on this big image. And then custom vision, it looks like, okay, this circle has some, so here has some things in it, and that circle has something on the side. And what you can notice is it didn't work that well. And I went back to the drawing board. I was like, okay, maybe the problem was, I try to find radio boxes in the entire image. What if I focus more? So I only sliced up the area that I'm interested in. And I done again 15 images. I manually go through all of the images. I manually labeled all of the checkboxes, radio boxes, whether they're checked or not. And I actually got a much, much better result. And it's not perfect, but it actually worked pretty good. I was like, wow, I might actually be able to use this. And then I was looking at certain things, and like you can see over here, it actually thinks this one is empty. I was like, not really. So I decided to, well, this could be a good point where I could at least identify where the radio boxes in this case are, and then use a little bit of math to calculate where the other radio boxes are, and then maybe use a little bit of manual computer vision to figure out whether it might be checked or unchecked. I went into a different way. I went for plan C. And what I tried to do is combine custom form recognizer with ML.NET. This thing over here that I really, really love. And ML.NET is essentially machine learning for .NET developers. And what I looked at form recognizer is, hey, I'm actually getting a lot of details for every sentence it recognizes. Like, for instance, I'm not training to recognize, do you attend primarily for the, but I still get data for it. I still get the boundary box. So the boundary box is roughly like this. And that gave me an idea. If I can get all of the location of all these labels, I might be able to calculate where these radio boxes is, and then where these label radio boxes are, and then I might be able to cut them out and then put it into a very, very specialized machine learning algorithm that only focuses on whether a radio box is checked or not. And that's exactly what I tried to do. So I started with trying to figure out where the labels are. And luckily, the form recognizer is actually pretty good. Now, occasionally I get things like this, but I only care about this, so that the left start is always consistent and the top is also consistent. So the top left are consistent across all of the forms. And then next thing I did is I made a ruler so I can see, okay, am I getting this really nice straight line for all of the forms? And it actually worked on most of the forms. Then what I said is, hey, the distance between those two is always constant. So let me remember how many pixels are between those two lines and use this as a constant to calculate everything else. And then I basically try to use this relative unit to figure out that there's 6.5 relative units between the beginning and the first radio box. And I done this for all of the 5 radio boxes. And then I got this. And all I had to do then is just cut them out and then use them for machine learning. So this is a little bit of code. If you're interested, you can ping me. I can share a little bit of the code. Unfortunately, I don't have the source code out yet because my source material has a lot of privacy information, which I obviously don't want to share. You might have seen that everything is censored. I don't want that information to go out, but I am working on making a model available for everyone so they can recognize whether a radio box is checked or not. And you can see here, this is somewhat simple mathematical equations and loops to figure out where the radio boxes are. This is just a small snippet of it. You can see the code is really ugly, but it actually works. And what I ended up is with 15,000 radio boxes of checked and unchecked states, which is a lot. Like previously, I had maybe 80 different images of different checkboxes. Now I have 15,000. And I have a couple of more training data coming in. So I think I'll end up with about 24,000 images by the end of the year. So yeah, this is a lot of data to go with. And now the next step is how can I actually now train the machine to be able to recognize radio boxes? So if you use the latest Visual Studio, you can actually go right-click on a project, add machine learning. If you don't have it, you can just go to ml.net space model builder, and there's instructions how to enable that. And then once I opened that, I went to image classification. I selected the folder where I manually dragged around about 120 checked images and 80 unchecked images in this kind of format. And after I trained, the accuracy is very promising. It's 100%. And keep in mind that it's actually pretty interesting. There's a lot of different radio boxes, different styles of marking, and it's still got 100% accuracy. This is either really good or really bad, really suspicious. And in this case, it turns out to be really good. Because if I put a random radio box, it's actually 98% sure that it is the right radio box. And I did this with hundreds of forms. I went the same process of figuring out where is the radio button, and then cut it out, then feed it into the machine learning I showed you here. And it worked for 80% of the forms. I cannot say that it worked 100% correctly for all those 80%, but I didn't detect any anomalies. I picked up, I think, about 30 random forms, and it worked 100% correctly. So I was really happy with that. And there are ways to figure out if it's working incorrectly. For instance, if a form has 2 answers for one question or has 0 answers for one question, then there's a good chance there's something wrong with that with that recognition, and then you can look at that form and say, okay, it recognizes this radio box to be checked, but it isn't. And to get to this point, to increase the number of forms that I could process, I found out that not all of the labels were completely legible for the OCR. And what I did, I used a little bit of math to correct some of the mistakes that were made. So I basically compensated in case some of the labels weren't found. But it's still not perfect. What you can see here is on some of the forms, it's quite rare. My math is way off in the last two radio boxes. This is still something I'm working on, but I got to a point where only 10%, I know that only 10% are not working well, whereas 90% either work really well or there might be some little mistakes. So in summary, if you're interested more in details, you can actually ping me. I could do 1 hour talk just regarding the radio boxes, and I hope I haven't spent too much time explaining here. The data on forms is really easy to recognize, but if you want to recognize the radio boxes at the moment, it's actually quite hard. Hopefully, Microsoft is going to release the feature and you'll just be able to click it like we can click it with the text and just train for those checkboxes and radio boxes to be specific tag, and then we'll be able to just look at whether that is checked or not. But for now, I have spent over 40 hours trying to find a solution for it. I kind of found it. I'm happy with the solution I got to. I'll try to make it as generic as possible for others to use. And if not the actual source code, I will at least publish my model with the images that I managed to generate, so you won't have to deal with that problem. And yeah, I'm also now ready for the post-virtual user group world. And with that, thank you.
Thank you, JK. Yeah, that was a lot of information. That was really cool. I love how you you got 15,000 radio boxes. That's fantastic. Oh, but that's the beauty of it, isn't it?
Yeah, I asked my sanity a couple of times when I worked on this.
Yeah, no kidding. It's like more checkboxes. Oh, no, that's really cool. So I got to ask. So we didn't have any questions on the chat, so you must have answered everything perfectly. But it's in what other scenarios here? Obviously, you're talking about it doesn't do checkboxes and radio buttons and natively just yet. But is this a solution for most form problems, or is it still very much you need a special type of form to make this work properly?
So I only tried a couple of forms, but you can say I have right now behind me for Medicare form, and the Medicare form actually would work pretty nicely because what you need to think about, there are two types of forms that Azure Forms works really, really well. One is where all the labels are in the fixed space. And the ones where you have one part that is fixed space and the other part is like a table, and that table can span across multiple pages. So it can recognize patterns. So it can recognize table, and then it can read data from that table. But if you have a form that has some of the parts of the form that pops in randomly based on some conditions and stuff like that, and changes depending on the answers, and it might change the shape and stuff like that. It may or may not have certain tags in it. You might have problems. So yeah, for the printed forms, you shouldn't have a problem. You might want to have a custom vision recognition or something like that, or something that is able to identify what type of form it is so that you can use the right model for it.
Yep, no, that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, you wouldn't want to mix multiple different forms into one model.
No,
I
I
want to say.
wouldn't have thought so. Yeah, that's just making it harder. So all I can say is that if anyone wants to see JK again, you are doing a workshop at NDC Minnesota, I believe, on the 8th of September, or it starts on the 8th. So that's one option. I'm sure you're going to be in other user groups, either virtually or when we are allowed to meet face to face again, we might be in person as well.
Yeah, we have Brisbane AI user group that I host. I think it's going to be next week on Thursday. We have the bot framework going out from Arafat. But yeah, I'm present in a lot of user groups, and I'm happy to present.
Yeah, good on you, mate. That's really good. But thank you so much for joining us here at Azure Community Live. And again, if anyone wants to be involved, either we're looking for co-hosts as well to organize events or even presenting. Let us know either via Twitter or YouTube or whatever way you can find us. So thank you very much, JK, and
thank you for having me.
Time. Lovely. See you, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.